Hello everyone! Today I'm going to share my thoughts on a wacky musical comedy I saw last week, 1942's Star-Spangled Rhythm. A group of sailors on shore leave descend on Paramount Studios in search of beautiful girls. They think they'll have an in because Johnny, played by Eddie Bracken, is under the impression his father has become an executive producer there overnight. The truth is that Johnny's dad, played by Victor Moore, is just a humble gatekeeper, and he's terrified of being found out. With the help of Betty Hutton's enthusiastic telephone operator, who's in love with Johnny, they keep the ruse going, even managing to convince the biggest stars at Paramount to put on a show for the Navy. This was a wild ride, one of a little subgenre of films from the golden age that I call the patriotic all-star musical comedy revue. Others in that set include 1943's Thank Your Lucky Stars, produced by Warner Brothers, and Thousands Cheer, produced by MGM, 1944's Hollywood Canteen, produced by Warner Brothers and based on The Real Place, founded by Betty Davis and John Garfield. In the post-war era, there was 1947's Variety Girl, which features a lot of the same stars as this movie, and 1951's Starlift. But before all of these films, there was Star-Spangled Rhythm. I don't actually know if it was the first of its kind, but it does predate the others I've just mentioned. This was a ridiculous movie, and I mean that in a good way and a not-so-good way. I liked the second half, which is where the bulk of the cameos are. The first half, it all starts with a lie that didn't need to be told, and that lie balloons, as lies do, getting more complicated and dragging other people into the deception. 5 minutes in, I identified it as a story that would drive my mom crazy, and sure enough, not long after I had that thought, she turned to me and said, "This is so irritating." It's definitely lacking in the narrative department, and the main characters aren't very compelling. There's not much to Johnny, and his dad is a fool, and with all due respect to Victor Moore, I find the fretful, wobbly way he talks kind of grating. It is effective in Make Way for Tomorrow, and I know a lot of people like him in It Happened on Fifth Avenue. I'm not one of those people.
Polly, haven't we had trouble enough?
Didn't you get yourself into it?
Betty Hutton, who is most famous for her role as Annie Oakley in the 1950 musical Annie Get Your Gun, plays this part with equal gusto, and I do admire her energy, even if I spent most of the movie thinking, whoa, too much! I'm surprised she only has one song here, and that's in a scene where she's in a jeep with the sailors getting tossed around as they zip over hills and ditches. This part was insane. I have no idea why they're doing any of this, but it is impressively bizarre, as is the running gag where Hutton disguises her voice on the phone by changing her pitch and biting down on napkins and things.
This is Mr. Surter's secretary. Mrs. Surter would like to speak to him.
Now, wait a minute.
There are several elements like that, gags that are kind of funny, but also kind of weird. There's this one wisecracking, harmonica-playing sailor, played by Gil Lamb, who has moves like a slinky, which is fascinating. But I found him annoying, especially when he interrupts an elaborate song and dance number that's being filmed on a soundstage. Now I get it. That's the joke. They're doing this big number, filming it for a movie, and then these guys go rushing in and dance with all the girls, and it's wrecked. The whole thing is ruined, and it's chaotic. That's the joke. I get it. I just didn't find it funny, and it just made me feel like, ugh, these stupid, horny idiots. I also felt like, this doesn't really reflect well on the Navy, does it? Half an hour in, I was wondering, where are all those people I saw listed in the main titles? I want to see them. So far, we'd gotten Paulette Goddard for about 2 seconds. Cecil B. DeMille and Preston Sturges show up, getting mad at Walter Abel's producer, who doesn't know he's being impersonated, and therefore has no idea why everyone at Paramount suddenly hates him. And Anne Revere is a highlight here as his cool, dry secretary. And Dick Powell and Mary Martin perform a number in a film film within the film sequence. Seeing Dick Powell in this smiley musical persona is always funny to me because I primarily associate him with his noirs like Murder My Swede and Pitfall, where he reinvented his screen image, and then later he became a successful director. But at this point, audiences knew him as a singer in Busby Berkeley musicals, often paired with Ruby Keeler or Joan Blondell. Mary Martin is also about a dozen years away from her iconic, career-defining debut as Peter Pan, and then a few years after that, she would originate the role of Maria in The Sound of Music on stage. So it's interesting to see them paired here. The best part of the number, though, is the quartet section. The song's pretty uninspiring until the Black Porters start singing, and then it's great. But it's not until the second half that the movie delivers on its promise, when the stars turn out to put on a show. Paulette Goddard, Dorothy Lamour, and Veronica Lake perform a song lamenting their trademarks, a sweater, a sarong, and a peekaboo bang. I got the impression Veronica Lake wasn't totally comfortable here. She seems a little stiff, and she only has a couple solo lines. But it's an amusing number, and then three men come out impersonating them, which made it even funnier. The only one I recognized right away was Arthur Treacher, who seems like one of the last people to do something like this. Susan Hayward appears briefly, might have been the easiest day's work she ever had. Equally quick is a gangster parody sketch with Alan Ladd and MacDonald Carey. I did wonder if it was so short because they didn't want to have to do much to conceal Alan Ladd's height. He was 5'6", which is taller than me, but often in his movies they would make him stand on a box or put his leading lady in a ditch. I did notice that they have 6-foot-tall MacDonald Carey standing upstage and facing him at an odd angle. Anyway, it's a blink and you'll miss it sketch, so if you're a Ladd or Carey superfan, don't just watch the movie for them, because you'll be disappointed. Eddie Anderson shows up playing Rochester, his character from The Jack Benny Show, and does a fun song and dance routine. Bob Hope appears as himself, later than I expected, since I got this from the library as part of a 2-movie set released for the Bob Hope collection. The quality's not great, by the way. You may have already noticed this. There are random color streaks caused, I believe, by deterioration of the negative. As the Master of Ceremonies, Hope does some stand-up, which is very appropriate because Bob Hope devoted much of his long life to entertaining the troops. He went on USO tours for decades, doing his last one in 1990. He also performs a sketch that includes a silly shower routine with William Bendix, not someone I associate with slapstick, although he was in Abbott and Costello's Whodunit that same year. This was entertaining, and then at the end of the film, Hope's frequent co-star Bing Crosby comes out and does a big patriotic finish, which, given the title and the time period, is fitting. I might have come away from this movie saying, it was okay, except there were 2 parts that did make me and my mom roar with laughter. I roared with laughter, she's more ladylike. One is the sequence where Betty Hutton shows us just how flexible she is when she tries to climb over the studio wall. These 2 guys are passing by and try to help, but the short one's hand is like Velcro. It keeps getting stuck, resulting in an absurd acrobatic routine. It gets more ridiculous and awkward as it goes on and on and on, and honestly, there were a couple moments that made me wonder how they got this past the censors. As I'm filming this, I still have no idea who those 2 men are. I'm guessing they were a well-known comedy duo at the time, but I don't recognize them, and I haven't yet been able to identify them. There were a few cases like that, where people were featured as if the audience should know them. Like this guy in the Bob Hope sketch. Turns out he's musician and comedian Jerry Colonna, who was Hope's sidekick on radio and film. And this eccentric lady who tries to audition for Victor Moore is actress, singer, and comedian Cass Daly, who I'm pretty sure I've never heard of or seen before, and I admit I didn't find her funny at all. There are also people I saw listed in the cast online who I know, but I never spotted, like Woody Strode, Sterling Holloway, Robert Preston, Eva Gabor, Cecil Kellaway, Susanna Foster. Maybe if I scrutinize the movie again, I'll find them, and if I do, I'll throw up their pictures.
With a sweater,
A sarong?
And a peekaboo blank.
But the part that really tickled us featured Francho Tone, Ray Milland, Fred McMurray, and Lynn Overman, who I'm not familiar with. They perform a sketch called If Men Played Cards as Women Do. The guys gather at Tone's house for a card game, but all of their mannerisms and conversation imitate how women talk and behave, or at least how they think women talk and behave, and it's hilarious. I am sure that some people would condemn it as sexist, but I loved this part. I would have watched an entire movie that was just variations on this sketch.
Now, are the red chips worth more than the blue chips?
I don't know. Let's make them all worth the same thing.
All right, quarter of a cent apiece.
But let's just pretend they're dollars.
Yeah, that makes it more exciting.
Yeah.
I also liked That Old Black Magic number, which features the only song I already knew, and an artsy dream sequence with ballerina Vera Zorina. So in the end, despite how I felt for a good chunk of it, the movie's not a complete loss. The whole thing is, well, I've already said, ridiculous, absurd, silly. You get the idea. But some of it is quite fun, and as a scrapbook of the era and a who's who of Paramount in 1942, it's a charming novelty. I hope you enjoyed this review. I know it was a little random. Probably most people haven't seen this movie, let alone heard of it, but there were just so many things that I wanted to comment on. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I'll be back next Saturday with a new video. Thanks for watching.